The iron poker glowed red in the firelight, and Julia Garrison knew what was coming as her stepbrother Marcus held it with trembling hands, his eyes wild with the desperation of a man who had already lost everything except his need for control. It was late summer in 1883, and the Arizona Territory heat had turned their small ranch outside Wilcox into a furnace of dust and despair. Julia's father had died 6 months earlier, leaving her at the mercy of her stepmother Agnes and Agnes's son Marcus, a bitter man of 28 who had watched his mother sign over half the ranch to Julia in her father's will. The injustice of it, Marcus had raged, that a girl of 19 should inherit anything when he had worked this land for years. Julia had been planning to leave for weeks, saving every coin she could hide, preparing to flee to Tucson where her mother's sister lived. But Marcus had discovered her small bundle of belongings hidden beneath the floorboards in her room, and now she stood in the barn with her back against the wooden wall, nowhere left to run. "You think you can just leave?" Marcus's voice cracked with something between fury and fear. "You think you can take what's yours and abandon us? That land should be mine, all of it." "Marcus, please," Julia whispered, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. "I don't want the ranch. You can have it. Just let me go. Let you go so you can tell the law I forced you out. So you can come back with papers and lawyers." He stepped closer, the poker still glowing with heat. "No, you will stay, and you will sign over your portion properly." Julia darted to the left, trying to reach the barn door, but Marcus was faster. He grabbed her arm and she screamed, fighting against his grip. They struggled, and then Marcus's boot caught her ankle, sending her crashing to the ground. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs, and before she could recover, she felt the searing, unimaginable pain of the hot iron pressed against the soles of her feet. Her screams tore through the night air, raw and primal. The smell of burning flesh made her gag between sobs. Marcus held the poker there for only seconds, but it felt like an eternity before he pulled away, his face pale with what he had done. "God forgive me," he muttered, dropping the poker with a clang. "God forgive me, but you will stay now. You cannot run on those feet." Julia lay on the barn floor, her vision swimming with pain and shock. Through her tears, she watched Marcus stumble out of the barn, and then she heard nothing but her own ragged breathing and the distant howl of a coyote somewhere in the darkness. She did not know how long she lay there. The pain was so consuming that time seemed to stop entirely. She tried once to stand, but the moment her feet touched the ground, agony shot through her entire body, and she collapsed again, sobbing into the dusty barn floor. Dawn was breaking when she heard the sound of a horse approaching the barn. Julia's whole body tensed with fear that Marcus had returned, but the footsteps that entered were different, lighter and more measured. "Good Lord in heaven." The voice was deep and gentle, tinged with a Texas drawl. Julia managed to lift her head and saw a man silhouetted in the barn doorway, backlit by the pink sunrise. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty brown hat and a trail-worn coat. "Please," Julia managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Help me." The man crossed the distance between them in quick strides, kneeling beside her. In the growing light, Julia could see his face clearly now. He had strong, weathered features, a jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds that widened with horror when he saw her feet. "Who did this to you?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "My stepbrother. Please, I need to get away from here. He will come back." The man did not hesitate. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her as carefully as if she were made of glass. Julia bit back a cry as the movement jarred her injuries. "My name's Travis Fletcher," he said quietly as he carried her out of the barn. I was passing through, saw your barn door open, and thought to check if everything was all right. Thank God I did. Julia, she managed to say. Julia Garrison. Travis's horse, a large chestnut mare, stood patiently nearby. With Julia still in his arms, Travis somehow managed to mount, settling her across his lap. She leaned against his chest, too exhausted and pain-racked to care about propriety. "There's a doctor in Wilcox," Travis said. "We will get you help." "No," Julia said urgently, finding strength in her fear. "Marcus will look for me there first. Please, anywhere but Wilcox." Travis was quiet for a moment, his arms steady around her as the horse began to walk. "I have a camp about 10 miles north of here, up in the hills. It is not much, but it is hidden and safe. I can tend to your wounds there. I learned field medicine during my time as a ranch hand in Texas, seen my share of injuries." Julia nodded against his chest, having no other choice but to trust this stranger. As they rode away from the ranch, she let herself believe, just for a moment, that she might actually escape. The ride was torturous despite Travis's careful handling. Every movement of the horse sent fresh waves of pain through Julia's feet. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the steady beat of Travis's heart beneath her cheek and the low, soothing words he murmured to keep her present. "Stay with me, Julia. We are almost there. You are doing fine. Stay with me." When they finally reached Travis's camp, the sun was high and merciless. Julia saw through half-closed eyes that it was indeed simple. A canvas tent set up beneath a cluster of cottonwood trees, a fire ring with a coffee pot, and supplies packed neatly under a tarp. But it was sheltered and hidden in a small canyon and blessedly far from Marcus. Travis dismounted carefully and carried Julia into the tent, laying her down on his bedroll. "I need to look at your feet," he said gently. "It will hurt, but I need to see how bad the damage is." Julia nodded, bracing herself. She had not looked at her feet herself, too afraid of what she would see. Travis worked with steady, practiced hands, cutting away what remained of her boots and stockings. She heard his sharp intake of breath. "The burns are deep," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "But I have seen worse heal. I will need to clean them and keep them bandaged. The next few days will be hard, Julia. I will not lie to you about that." "Will I walk again?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Travis met her eyes, and she saw nothing but honesty there. "Yes. It will take time and it will hurt, but you will walk again. I give you my word I will make sure of it." Over the next hours, Travis worked with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. He cleaned her burns with water he boiled carefully over the fire, applied a salve he made from herbs he kept in his supplies, and wrapped her feet in clean bandages torn from one of his spare shirts. Through it all, Julia gritted her teeth and tried not to scream, though tears streamed silently down her face. "You are incredibly brave," Travis said when he finally finished. He offered her water and she drank gratefully. "Most men I have known would have passed out from pain like that." "I do not feel brave," Julia whispered. "I feel broken." "Broken things can heal," Travis said, "and they are often stronger for it afterward." That first night Julia slept fitfully, waking often from the pain or from nightmares of Marcus and the glowing poker. Each time she found Travis sitting nearby, keeping watch. Once when she woke with a cry, he moved closer and took her hand. "You are safe," he said simply. "I promise you, you are safe." Something about the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, allowed Julia to finally sink into deeper sleep. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Travis would wake with the dawn, build up the fire, and make coffee and whatever simple meal he could manage from his supplies. He changed Julia's bandages twice daily, always warning her before he began, always praising her strength when it was done. Between treatments, he would sit with her and they would talk. Julia learned that Travis was 26, originally from a ranch outside San Antonio. He had left Texas 2 years earlier after his father died, and his older brother inherited everything, making it clear that Travis was no longer welcome in the home where he had been born. "Sounds familiar," Julia said with a bitter laugh. "Seems we have that in common," Travis agreed. Family that values land over blood. He had been drifting since then, working as a ranch hand, a trail guide, sometimes a guard for wagon trains. He was on his way to New Mexico when he had stopped near Julia's ranch, something he described as instinct telling him to check the property. "I am glad you listened to that instinct," Julia said softly. Travis smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. "So am I." Julia told him about her life, too. Her real mother had died when she was 12, a fever that swept through Wilcox one terrible winter. Her father had remarried 2 years later, desperate for help with the ranch and perhaps for companionship in his grief. Agnes had seemed kind enough at first, but her son Marcus had always watched Julia with resentment, as if her very existence was a theft. "My father tried to be fair," Julia explained. "He left Marcus the house and most of the land, but he left me a parcel too, enough to sell and start a new life. He knew I would want to leave." "Your father sounds like a good man," Travis said. "He was. I miss him every day." By the 5th day, Julia's burns had stopped weeping and the angry red had faded somewhat. Travis said this was a good sign, that infection had not set in. He helped her sit up more, propping her against his saddle bag so she could look out at the canyon. It was beautiful here, Julia realized. The hills were dotted with juniper and pine, and in the early morning, deer would come to drink from a small spring nearby. The air smelled of sage and sun-warmed earth. It was so different from the flat, dusty ranch where she had spent the last 7 years. "You think Marcus is looking for me?" she asked Travis one afternoon. Travis did not lie to her. "Probably. But he does not know where to look, and this country is vast. As long as we are careful, he will not find us here." "Us," Julia repeated. "Travis, you have already done so much for me. You do not have to stay. You have your own life, your own plans." Travis was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I have been drifting for 2 years, Julia. No real plans, just moving from one place to another. The truth is, I have not felt like I had a purpose in a long time. Not until I found you in that barn." Julia's heart did something strange in her chest, a flutter that had nothing to do with pain. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I will stay as long as you need me," Travis said, turning to meet her eyes. "I will help you heal, and then I will help you get wherever you want to go. If you want me to, that is." "I want you to," Julia whispered. Something shifted between them in that moment, something unspoken but profound. Travis reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Julia's face, his touch feather-light and careful. Julia found herself leaning into that touch, starved for gentleness after so much cruelty. The second week brought new challenges and new progress. Julia's feet were healing, but she was still unable to walk. Travis fashioned a crutch from a sturdy branch, but even putting the slightest pressure on her feet brought tears to her eyes. "It is too soon," Travis said gently, taking the crutch away. "We will try again in a few days." Julia's frustration boiled over. "I cannot just lie here forever, Travis. I am useless like this. You should not have to care for me like I am a child." "You are not useless, and you are certainly not a child," Travis said firmly. "You are injured and healing. There is no shame in that." "I hate being helpless," Julia said, her voice breaking. "I hate that Marcus did this to me. I hate that I cannot even stand on my own feet." Travis knelt beside her, his expression understanding. "Then be angry. Rage against it if you need to, but do not mistake healing for helplessness." The fact that you are still here, still fighting, still getting up each day despite the pain. That is the opposite of helpless, Julia. His words broke something open in her, and she found herself crying properly for the first time since the burning. Travis held her carefully, letting her sob against his shoulder, offering nothing but his solid presence and quiet strength. When the tears finally subsided, Julia felt lighter somehow, as if something poisonous had been drained from her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," Travis replied. As the days turned into weeks, Julia grew stronger. Her feet still hurt, but the pain was manageable now, a constant ache rather than searing agony. Travis helped her practice putting weight on them, supporting her with his arms around her waist as she took tentative steps around the camp. "That is it," he encouraged as she managed 3 shaky steps. "You are doing beautifully," Julia laughed, breathless from the effort. "I am shuffling like an old woman." "You are walking," Travis corrected. "That is what matters." They stood there for a moment, Julia leaning against Travis's chest, his arms still around her. She tilted her head back to look up at him and found him already gazing down at her, his expression soft and open in a way she had never seen before. "Julia," he said quietly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "Yes. I need to tell you something, and if it is not welcome, you can tell me and we will never speak of it again." Julia's heart was racing now. "Tell me." "These weeks with you, taking care of you, talking with you, just being near you, I have never felt this way before. I think I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not right. I know I am falling in love with you." Joy bloomed in Julia's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Travis, I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I have been falling in love with you too. I think I started the moment you carried me out of that barn." Travis's smile was radiant. He cupped her face gently in his hands, giving her every chance to pull away, but Julia only leaned closer. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Julia felt like she was coming home to a place she had never been before. They broke apart slowly, both a little breathless. Travis rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do right by you, Julia. I want to court you properly, the way you deserve." "You have been courting me," Julia said with a smile. "Caring for me, protecting me, making me laugh even when I was in pain. If that is not courtship, I do not know what is." "Then let me continue," Travis said. "Let me keep caring for you, keep protecting you. And when you are fully healed, when you can walk without pain, I want to take you somewhere safe and build a life with you if you will have me." "Yes," Julia said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Julia felt the last of her fear and pain begin to dissolve, replaced by hope and love, and the certainty that she had found something rare and precious. The next weeks were some of the happiest of Julia's life, despite the continued challenges of healing. Travis was true to his word, courting her with a sweetness that made her heart ache in the best way. He would pick wildflowers and tuck them behind her ear. He taught her to play card games with a battered deck he carried in his saddlebag. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and he would tell her stories of his travels, or she would tell him about the books she had loved to read before her father died and Agnes had forbidden such frivolity. "When we have our own place," Travis said one evening, "the first thing I will buy you is books, a whole library if you want it." "Our own place," Julia repeated, savoring the words. "Where do you think we should go?" Travis considered this. "I have heard good things about New Mexico territory. There is land available for homesteading and the towns are growing. We could file a claim, build a small ranch, nothing grand but something that is ours." "I do not need grand," Julia said. "I just need somewhere I belong, somewhere with you. You will always belong with me," Travis promised. By the start of the 5th week, Julia could walk short distances without help. though her feet still ached after too much use. Travis had fashioned her a pair of soft moccasins from deerskin, padded with extra cloth, that were easier on her healing scars than regular boots. "We should think about moving on soon," Travis said one morning. "My supplies are running low, and you need proper meals to finish healing. There is a town called Silver Creek about 30 miles west of here. It is small and off the main roads. We could resupply there, and I could ask around about land in New Mexico." Julia nodded, though the thought of leaving their hidden canyon filled her with unexpected sadness. This place had become a sanctuary, the site of her healing and her falling in love. But she knew Travis was right. They could not hide here forever. "What about Marcus?" she asked quietly. "We will be careful," Travis said. "And if he somehow finds us, he will have to go through me to get to you. I will not let him hurt you again, Julia. That is a promise." They broke camp 2 days later, packing up the tent and supplies. Travis helped Julia onto his horse, settling her in front of him the same way he had that first terrible morning. But this time, Julia was not fleeing in pain and fear. This time, she was riding toward a future she had chosen. The journey to Silver Creek took 2 days of careful travel. Travis kept them off the main trails, navigating by landmarks and instinct. They camped one night under the stars, and Julia fell asleep wrapped in Travis's arms, feeling safer than she had ever felt in her life. Silver Creek was indeed small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and a handful of other buildings. Travis left Julia at the boarding house, paying for a room where she could rest and wash while he handled the resupplying and inquiries about New Mexico. The boarding house owner was a kind, older woman named Mrs. Patterson, who asked no uncomfortable questions about why a young lady was traveling with a cowboy, or why she wore soft moccasins instead of proper boots. She brought Julia warm water for washing, a clean dress that had belonged to her daughter, and a hearty meal of stew and fresh bread. "You have a good man there," Mrs. Patterson said as she set down the tray of food. "I can see it in how he looks at you." "I know," Julia said with a smile. "I am very lucky." Travis returned that evening with supplies and news. He sat on the edge of Julia's bed, his hat in his hands, looking more animated than she had seen him in weeks. "There is a land office agent who comes through here once a month," he said. "He will be here in 2 weeks. He says there is good land available in the Mesilla Valley in New Mexico, near the Rio Grande. Water rights, fertile soil, room to grow. We could file a claim, Julia, start fresh." 2 weeks, Julia said. "Can we stay here that long?" "Mrs. Patterson says we can," Travis replied. "I will work for a rancher just outside town to pay for our room and board, and it will give your feet more time to heal." Julia reached for his hand. "It sounds perfect, Travis." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I want to marry you, Julia, before we go to New Mexico. I want you to be my wife properly and officially. Would you want that too?" "Yes," Julia said, her eyes shining, "more than anything." "There is a preacher here in town," Travis said. "We could marry this week if you want." "I know it is fast, but we have been through more in these weeks than most couples go through in years. I love you, and I want the world to know you are mine and I am yours." "This week," Julia agreed. "Let us not wait." They married 3 days later in the small church at the edge of Silver Creek. Mrs. Patterson stood as witness, along with the shopkeeper Mr. Donnelly and his wife. Julia wore the borrowed dress, and Travis had purchased a new shirt for the occasion. The preacher was an elderly man with kind eyes who seemed to understand that there was a story behind this sudden wedding, but respected their privacy enough not to pry. When Travis slipped a simple gold band onto Julia's finger, she felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. This was nothing like the future she had imagined growing up, but it was better because it was real and earned and built on genuine love. "I love you, Julia Fletcher," Travis said after the preacher pronounced them married. "I love you, Travis Fletcher," Julia replied, savoring her new name. They kissed as husband and wife, and Julia felt like her life was finally, truly beginning. The 2 weeks in Silver Creek passed in a sweet haze of new marriage and continued healing. Travis worked during the days for a rancher named Tom Winters, who needed help with his cattle before the fall drive. Julia stayed at the boarding house, helping Mrs. Patterson with cooking and mending in exchange for their room, giving her feet more time to fully recover. In the evenings, Travis would return dusty and tired, and they would have dinner with Mrs. Patterson before retiring to their room. There, in the privacy of their small space, they learned each other in the way of newlyweds, careful of Julia's still healing injuries but eager to express the love that had grown between them. "I never thought I could be this happy," Julia whispered one night, curled against Travis's chest. "Neither did I," Travis admitted. "I thought I would drift forever, but then I found you and suddenly I had a reason to stop drifting. You gave me a purpose, Julia. You gave me a home." "You are my home too," Julia said, "wherever we go as long as we are together." On the 13th day in Silver Creek, their peace was shattered. Julia was helping Mrs. Patterson hang laundry in the backyard when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. "I am looking for my stepsister." Julia Garrison, young woman, dark hair, about 19 years old. "She ran away from home over a month ago and the family is desperate to find her." Marcus's voice, coming from the front of the boarding house. Julia grabbed Mrs. Patterson's arm, her heart racing. The older woman took one look at her face and understood immediately. "Go inside, quickly. Upstairs. Do not make a sound." Julia fled as quietly as she could, her feet protesting the sudden movement but holding strong. She reached the room she shared with Travis and locked the door, pressing her ear against it to listen. She could hear Mrs. Patterson's voice, calm and measured. "I have not seen any young women matching that description, sir. Silver Creek is small. We would know if someone new arrived." "She might have been with someone," Marcus pressed. "A man, probably. Someone who helped her run." "There have been no strangers in town," Mrs. Patterson lied smoothly. "Just the usual cowhands passing through. Perhaps she went to one of the larger towns, Tucson or Tombstone." There was a long silence and Julia held her breath. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "If you do see her, there is a reward for information leading to her return. She is not well. She needs her family." "Of course," Mrs. Patterson said. "I will keep watch." Julia heard the sound of boots walking away, then the blessed silence. She sank to the floor, shaking with relief and residual fear. Marcus was here. He had found Silver Creek. How long before he found her, Mrs. Patterson came upstairs a few minutes later, her face grave. "That was him, was it not? The one who hurt you," Julia nodded, unable to speak. "He is staying at the saloon," Mrs. Patterson said, "asking questions all over town. Someone will mention the newlyweds at the boarding house eventually. Child, you need to leave tonight if possible." "Travis is not back yet," Julia said. "He went to help with fence repairs on the far pasture." "I will send my son to fetch him," Mrs. Patterson said decisively. "You pack what you can carry. The moment Travis returns, you ride out. Do not wait for morning." Julia wanted to argue, to say they could not leave Mrs. Patterson to face Marcus's questions alone, but she knew the older woman was right. Every moment they stayed was a moment Marcus could discover them. Travis returned within the hour, brought at a gallop by Mrs. Patterson's teenage son. Julia had their few belongings already packed. She saw the fury and fear in Travis's eyes when Mrs. Patterson explained what had happened. "We leave now," he said flatly. "Julia, can you ride?" "Yes," Julia said, though her feet throbbed at the thought. I can do whatever I need to do." Travis turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for everything you have done for us. We will not forget your kindness. Just be safe, Mrs. Patterson said, pressing a package of food into Julia's hands. "And be happy. That will be thanks enough." They slipped out the back way as dusk was falling, Travis leading his horse quietly until they were well clear of town. Only when they were a mile out did he help Julia mount, then swung up behind her. "Where are we going?" Julia asked. "South, then west," Travis said. "We will circle around and head for New Mexico by a different route. It will take longer, but it will be harder for him to track us." They rode through the night, Travis keeping them to rocky ground where their trail would be harder to follow. Julia dozed fitfully against his chest, waking whenever her feet shifted and sent pain shooting up her legs. But she did not complain. Freedom was worth the pain. By morning, they were deep in unfamiliar country, rolling hills covered in mesquite and prickly pear. Travis finally stopped to let the horse rest and water at a small creek. He helped Julia down and she sat heavily on a rock, pulling off her moccasins to check her feet. The scars were red and angry from the night's hard riding, but the skin had not broken. She was healing still, just slower than she hoped. Travis knelt in front of her, his hands gentle as he examined her feet. "I am sorry, Julia. I know this must hurt terribly." "It is all right," Julia said. "It is worth it to get away from him." "We will take it slower from here," Travis promised. "Stop more often. I will not push you past what you can handle." They continued their journey over the following days, moving steadily southwest. Travis navigated by the sun and stars, avoiding towns and settlements, keeping them hidden. They camped in canyons and beneath overhangs, and Travis hunted rabbits and quail to supplement their dwindling supplies. One evening, about a week after leaving Silver Creek, they spotted smoke on the horizon. Travis stiffened, his hand going to the rifle he kept strapped to his saddle. "Could be anyone," he said. "Travelers, cowboys, prospectors. Or Marcus," Julia said quietly. Travis studied the smoke for a long moment, then made a decision. "We will go around. Add a day to our journey, but safer." They moved carefully through the gathering darkness, giving the distant fire a wide berth. But as they rounded a rise, they heard voices and the sound of horses. Travis immediately pulled his horse behind a cluster of boulders, pressing a finger to his lips to signal Julia to silence. Through a gap in the rocks, they could see 3 men on horseback, silhouetted against the sunset. One of them was Marcus. Julia recognized his shape, the way he sat his horse, and her blood turned to ice. "She has to be out here somewhere," Marcus was saying. "A girl with burned feet cannot have gotten far. Someone helped her, some drifter probably." "We have been searching for weeks, Marcus," one of the other men said. "Maybe she made it to Tucson after all." "No," Marcus said stubbornly. "She is close. I can feel it." The men moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Travis and Julia stayed hidden behind the rocks for a long time after, neither daring to move or speak. Finally, Travis whispered, "We need to move fast now. If he is this close, we cannot take our time." "My feet," Julia started to say, but Travis shook his head. "I know, and I am sorry, but we do not have a choice. I will carry you if I have to, Julia. We will get through this together." They pushed hard that night and the next day, stopping only briefly for the horse to rest. Julia's feet screamed with pain, but she bit her lip and endured. Travis's arms around her were steady and sure, and that gave her the strength to continue. By the second night, they crossed into New Mexico territory. Travis let out a breath of relief. "We are almost there, Julia. Just a little further." They reached the Mesilla Valley 4 days later, and it was like entering a different world. The Rio Grande wound through the valley like a silver ribbon, and the land was green and fertile in a way the Arizona desert had not been. Small farms and ranches dotted the landscape, and the town of Mesilla itself was larger and more prosperous than Silver Creek. Travis found the land office, and they met with the agent, a businesslike man named Mr. Thompson, who showed them maps of available claims. They chose a parcel along the river, 160 acres with water rights and a small adobe structure already built on it, abandoned by the previous claimant. "It will need work," Mr. Thompson warned. "The roof leaks and the walls need repairing, but the bones are solid." "We will take it," Travis said, and signed the papers that made them official homesteaders. Their first sight of the property was both encouraging and daunting. The adobe house was small, just 2 rooms, and Mr. Thompson had been right about the repairs needed. But it was surrounded by cottonwood trees, and the sound of the river was peaceful, and Julia felt something settle in her chest. "It is perfect," she said. "It is ours," Travis replied, and the wonder in his voice made Julia smile. They threw themselves into the work of making the place livable. Travis repaired the roof using new timbers he bought in town, while Julia cleaned the interior and whitewashed the walls. Her feet still hurt at the end of each day, but they were growing stronger. She could walk without limping now, and the scars, while permanent, were fading to pale pink. They bought chickens and a milk cow from a neighboring farmer, and Travis built a small barn and coop. They planted a late vegetable garden, and Julia started herb beds near the house. Slowly, the property began to feel like a home. One evening, 2 months after arriving in New Mexico, Julia stood on the porch of their little house watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Travis came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "So happy I could burst," Julia said honestly. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is real, that we are here safe and together." "It is real," Travis assured her, "and it is only going to get better." They made friends among their neighbors, other homesteaders and ranchers who were building lives in this valley. There was a church in town, and they attended Sunday services, becoming part of the community. No one asked too many questions about where they had come from or why, respecting the frontier tradition that a person's past was their own business. Julia learned that she had a talent for growing things, her garden flourishing under her care. Travis worked hard to improve their land, clearing brush and repairing fences and gradually building up a small herd of cattle. They were not wealthy, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Winter came, mild by frontier standards, and they spent long evenings by the fire, talking and planning and dreaming of the future. Travis taught Julia to play the harmonica, and though she was terrible at it, he swore it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard because it was hers. Spring arrived with a rush of green and the return of migratory birds. Julia woke one morning feeling strange, a queasiness in her stomach that sent her running outside to be sick. She stood by the well afterward, breathing deeply, and felt Travis's concerned hand on her back. "Are you all right?" "Was it something you ate?" Julia turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face as realization dawned. "Travis, I think I might be pregnant." His eyes went wide, then blazed with joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing before carefully setting her down again. "Truly." "We are going to have a baby." "I think so," Julia said. "I will need to see the doctor in town to be certain, but all the signs are there." The doctor confirmed it the next week. Julia was about 2 months along, healthy and strong. The baby would arrive in late autumn, around October or November. Travis was beside himself with excitement and worry. He fussed over Julia constantly, insisting she rest more and not lift anything heavy. Julia found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I am not fragile." You are precious, Travis corrected. You and our child both. Let me take care of you. The summer passed in a golden haze. Julia's belly grew round, and she felt the first flutters of movement that gradually became strong kicks. Travis would lay his hand on her stomach and talk to the baby, telling stories and making promises about the life they would have together. I will teach you to ride, he would say, and to rope cattle, and to read the stars for navigation. And your mama will teach you to grow things and to be strong and brave like she is. Julia would stroke his hair and feel overwhelmed with love for this man who had saved her in more ways than one. Autumn came with cooler temperatures and the cottonwood trees turning gold. Julia was huge now, moving slowly and uncomfortably, eager to meet the child she had been carrying. Travis had converted the second room of their house into a nursery of sorts, building a cradle from cottonwood wood and asking the neighbor women for advice on what they would need. Julia went into labor on a cool October morning, just as the sun was rising. Travis rode immediately to fetch Mrs. Hernandez, a neighboring rancher's wife who served as the local midwife. While they waited for her arrival, Travis held Julia's hand and tried to hide his terror. I am scared, he admitted. I cannot lose you, Julia. You will not lose me, Julia said between contractions. I am strong, remember, you told me that yourself. Broken things heal stronger, Mrs. Hernandez arrived with her daughter Maria, and they took command of the situation with calm efficiency. Travis was banished to the front room, where he paced and prayed and started at every sound from the bedroom. The labor was long and hard, lasting well into the night. But Julia was indeed strong, and when dawn broke on a new day, the sharp cry of an infant filled the house. Travis burst into the room to find Julia propped up against pillows, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Mrs. Hernandez was smiling. Congratulations, you have a son. Travis approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Julia pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. Travis, meet your son. Travis reached out with a trembling hand to touch the baby's cheek and felt his heart expand in ways he never knew possible. He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Julia, you are amazing. They named him Thomas after Travis's father, with the middle name of James after Julia's. Thomas James Fletcher, born on October 17, 1884, under a clear New Mexico sky. The weeks after Thomas's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Travis proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at his son with an expression of awe that never seemed to fade. Julia recovered well from the birth, her body healing with the same strength that had brought her through the burning of her feet. By Christmas, she was back to most of her regular activities, though she now had the added joy and challenge of caring for an infant. They celebrated their first Christmas as a family of 3, decorating with pine branches and holly berries. Travis had secretly carved a set of wooden animals for Thomas, even though the baby was far too young to play with them yet. For when he is older, Travis explained, setting the little horse and cow and sheep in the cradle. So he will know about the ranch he is growing up on. As winter settled in, they spent cozy evenings by the fire, Thomas sleeping in his cradle while Travis and Julia made plans for the spring. They wanted to expand the cattle herd, maybe add some horses. Travis talked about building an addition to the house, giving them more room as Thomas grew. And maybe room for more children too, Julia said with a smile, if we are blessed with them. As many as you want, Travis said, pulling her close. Our house will be full of love and laughter. That is my promise to you. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next years. Thomas grew from infant to toddler, a bright and curious child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. He took his first steps in the spring of 1885, walking from Julia to Travis and back again, laughing at their cheers and applause. By 1886, Thomas was talking in full sentences, following Travis around the ranch and trying to help with chores in the way of small children. Julia was pregnant again, and in August of that year, she gave birth to a daughter they named Alice Grace. Alice was easier than Thomas had been, a placid baby who slept well and smiled often. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to hold her and help care for her, though he needed supervision to make sure his enthusiastic toddler affection did not overwhelm her. The ranch continued to prosper. Travis proved to have a good eye for cattle, and their herd grew healthy and strong. Julia's garden expanded each year, and she began selling her surplus vegetables and herbs in town, bringing in extra income. They were building something solid and real, a legacy for their children. One evening in the spring of 1887, when Thomas was almost 3 and Alice was 8 months old, Julia stood on the porch watching her husband play with their son. Travis was teaching Thomas to throw a lariat, the little boy's attempts more enthusiasm than skill but improving with each try. Julia rested a hand on her stomach, feeling the flutter of movement there. She had not told Travis yet about this third pregnancy, wanting to be certain. But she was certain now, and joy filled her at the thought of their growing family. Travis looked up and caught her watching, his face breaking into that smile she loved so much. He said something to Thomas, then jogged over to the porch, pulling Julia into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "You have that look." "What look?" "The one that says you have a secret," Travis teased. "Come on, tell me," Julia laughed. "I was thinking about how far we have come. Do you remember that morning in the barn when you found me?" Travis's expression grew serious. I remember thinking I had never seen anyone look so broken and so brave at the same time." "I was not brave," Julia said. "I was terrified." "You were both," Travis corrected. "And you still are one of the bravest people I know. Look at what you have overcome, Julia. Look at the life you have built." "We have built," Julia corrected. "None of this would exist without you, Travis. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me right back," Travis said softly. "I was lost before I found you, drifting without purpose. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building. You gave me a home." "We gave each other a home," Julia said. She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "And that home is about to get a little more crowded." It took Travis a moment to understand, then his eyes went wide. "You are pregnant again." "Truly, truly," Julia confirmed, laughing as he picked her up and spun her around just like he had the first time, his whoop of joy making Thomas look over curiously from his rope practice. Their third child, a son they named Daniel Robert, was born in December of 1887, arriving just before Christmas like an early present. Thomas and Alice were both fascinated by the new baby, though Alice was still too young to do more than pat his head gently. The late 1880s brought both challenges and triumphs. There was a drought in '88 that tested their water management and made them grateful for their river access. In '89, a late freeze killed some of their early garden plants, but they recovered and still had a good harvest. Through it all, Travis and Julia worked side by side. Partners in every sense of the word, by 1890, their ranch was one of the most successful in the valley. They had expanded their land holdings with an additional 80 acres, and their cattle herd numbered over 100 head. Travis had built the addition to the house he had promised, giving them 4 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Julia had become known in the area for her healing knowledge, the herbs and remedies she had learned from Mrs. Hernandez, and her own experimentation. People would come to their ranch seeking help for various ailments, and Julia never turned anyone away. One summer afternoon in 1891, a family arrived at their ranch asking for help with their daughter, who had been badly burned in a cooking accident. The girl was about 12, and her feet had been scalded with boiling water. Julia felt something twist in her chest as she looked at the girl's injuries. She exchanged a glance with Travis, who nodded slightly, understanding. "I can help," Julia said gently. "I know something about burn treatment. Let me see what I can do." She treated the girl's feet with the same care and knowledge that Travis had once used on her own injuries. Over the course of several weeks, with the family visiting regularly for new bandages and salve, the girl healed with minimal scarring. The girl's mother was tearfully grateful. "You saved her. We thought she might never walk right again." "She is strong," Julia said, "and she had good care. That makes all the difference." After the family left, Travis found Julia sitting on the porch, staring at the sunset. He sat beside her and took her hand. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I was thinking about how strange life is," Julia said. "How the worst thing that ever happened to me, the most painful and traumatic experience, has allowed me to help that little girl. If Marcus had not burned my feet, I would not have learned about burn treatment. I would not have been able to help her." "That does not make what he did any less evil," Travis said firmly. "You turned your pain into something good, Julia. That is on you, not on him." "I know," Julia said, "and I have not forgiven him. I never will. But I can accept that even terrible things can sometimes lead to unexpected good." Travis pulled her close. "You are an extraordinary woman, Julia Fletcher." "I am just me," Julia said, "but I am grateful for the life I have. For you, for our children, for this ranch. For every day I get to wake up free and loved." As the years continued, their family grew and flourished. Thomas proved to have his father's way with animals and became Travis's right hand on the ranch as he entered his teenage years. Alice inherited her mother's love of growing things and took over much of the garden work, expanding it year by year. Daniel was the scholar of the family, always reading when he could and talking about going to school in Santa Fe someday. Julia and Travis added 2 more children to their family, Rebecca in 1893 and Samuel in 1895. Their house was indeed full of love and laughter, just as Travis had promised, often chaotic but never without joy. One evening in the spring of 1900, Travis and Julia stood together on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. Their oldest children were grown, or nearly so, Thomas at 16 already as tall as his father, Alice at 14 becoming a lovely young woman. The younger 3 were inside doing evening chores, their voices carrying through the open windows. 1900, Julia said wonderingly. "A new century, Travis. Can you believe we have been together for 17 years? "Best 17 years of my life," Travis said. "Though I am not looking forward to Thomas and Alice starting to think about courting and marriage," Julia laughed. "They are growing up. We cannot stop that." "I know," Travis sighed. "I just remember being young and impulsive. I worry." "They have a good foundation," Julia assured him. "We have taught them well. They will make good choices." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, then Travis said, "Do you ever think about him? About Marcus?" Julia was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder if he is still alive, if he ever felt remorse for what he did. But mostly, I just feel grateful that I escaped, that you found me. Everything I have now exists because I got away from him." "Do you ever wish you had your father's ranch back?" Travis asked. "Your inheritance?" "No," Julia said firmly. "That place was never home, not really. This is home. You are home. Our children are home. I would not trade this life for anything." Travis kissed her temple. "I love you, Julia. More now than even on the day I married you, and I loved you desperately then." "I love you too," Julia said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Travis Fletcher." As the evening deepened into night, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the sounds of their family and the land they had built together. The scars on Julia's feet had faded to thin white lines, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for them. They no longer hurt, though she sometimes felt a twinge when the weather changed. Those scars were a reminder of what she had survived, but also of what she had found. Pain and healing, fear and love, brokenness and strength. She had walked through fire, both literal and figurative, and had emerged on the other side with a life richer than she had ever imagined possible. The years continued their steady march, bringing all the joys and sorrows that come with living. They lost neighbors and made new friends. They weathered droughts and floods, illnesses and injuries, the countless challenges of frontier life. But through it all, Travis and Julia faced everything together, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. Thomas married in 1903, bringing home a sweet young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. Alice married the following year to a rancher's son named Peter. They settled on land near Travis and Julia's ranch, staying close to family. Daniel did indeed go to school in Santa Fe, becoming a teacher and eventually opening a school in Mesilla itself. Rebecca and Samuel were still at home in 1905. Rebecca helping her mother with the house and garden, Samuel learning the ranch work from his father. Julia, now 41, found herself enjoying this stage of life, being a mother to younger children while also becoming a grandmother as Thomas and Sarah started their own family. One afternoon in the spring of 1906, Julia was working in her garden when a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was an elderly man, weather-beaten and tired-looking, and something about him made Julia's heart start to race with old fear. But when he dismounted and removed his hat, she saw it was not Marcus but someone she did not recognize. "Can I help you?" she asked, staying where she was with her garden hoe in hand, a weapon if she needed it. "I am looking for Julia Garrison," the man said, "though I was told she might go by Fletcher now." "I am Julia Fletcher," Julia said carefully. "What is this about? My name is Harold Simmons. I am a lawyer from Wilcox, Arizona. I have been searching for you for some time, Mrs. Fletcher." Julia felt ice in her veins. "Why? Your stepmother, Agnes, passed away last month, and your stepbrother Marcus died 3 years ago, consumption. There was no one else to inherit the ranch, and according to your father's will, you were entitled to a portion of the estate. I have been trying to locate you to settle matters." Julia stared at him, processing this information. Marcus was dead, had been dead for 3 years. All this time, she had carried a low level of fear that he might somehow find her, might show up to hurt her again, and he had been dead. "I do not want the ranch," Julia said, "or anything from it. Whatever needs to be done with the property, sell it, divide it, I do not care. I want nothing from that place. Mrs. Fletcher, it is a substantial inheritance," Mr. Simmons said. "At least $15,000 once the property is sold and debts settled." $15,000. It was a staggering sum, more money than Julia had seen in her entire life. But it was blood money, earned through her father's hard work but tainted by Agnes and Marcus's cruelty. "I will need to discuss it with my husband," Julia said finally. "Can you return tomorrow?" Mr. Simmons agreed and rode off to find lodging in town. Julia stood in her garden, shaking, until she heard Travis's voice. "Julia, who was that?" She turned to find her husband approaching, concern on his face. Julia told him everything, the words tumbling out, and found herself crying without quite knowing why. Perhaps it was relief that Marcus was truly gone, or grief for the girl she had been before the burning, or simply the shock of it all. Travis held her close, letting her cry it out. When she finally quieted, he said, "What do you want to do, Julia? It is your inheritance, your choice." "I do not want it," Julia said. "But that is a lot of money, Travis. Money that could help our children, pay for Daniel's continued education, help Thomas and Alice with their own ranches." "Then we will take it," Travis said simply. "Not because we need it or because you owe them anything, but because it is yours by right. Your father intended for you to have something from his life's work. Let his wish be honored, even if it took 23 years to happen." Julia nodded slowly. "All right. But I want to do something good with it. Something that would make my father proud." Over the next weeks, Julia and Travis worked with Mr. Simmons to finalize the sale of the Arizona ranch. The money was transferred to an account in Mesilla, and Julia felt a strange sense of closure when Mr. Simmons handed her the final paperwork. "It is done," he said. "The property has been sold and the estate settled. You are free of it now, Mrs. Fletcher. Free." Julia had been free for 23 years, but somehow this felt like a final severing of the chains that had bound her to that painful past. They used some of the money to help their children, setting up Thomas and Alice with funds to expand their ranches, paying for Daniel's continued education, and putting aside money for Rebecca and Samuel when they were ready to start their own lives. But Julia also insisted on using a portion to establish a fund for people in need of medical care who could not afford it, administered through the church in Mesilla. "For people like that little girl with the burned feet," Julia explained. "So that no one has to suffer without treatment because they cannot pay." Travis kissed her forehead. "Your father would be proud of you, Julia. I know I am." The fund became one of Julia's passions in the following years. She worked with local doctors and the church to identify people in need, and the fund helped dozens of families over time. It felt like redemption, taking something born of pain and transforming it into healing for others. By 1910, Travis and Julia were in their late 40s and early 50s, no longer young but still vigorous and active. Their children were all grown, scattered across New Mexico, but all close enough for regular visits. They had 7 grandchildren, with more likely on the way. On a warm evening in June of that year, Travis and Julia hosted a gathering at their ranch for the whole family. Children ran and played while adults sat on the expanded porch, talking and laughing. At one point, little Sarah, Thomas's eldest daughter, climbed into Julia's lap. "Grandma, tell us a story," she begged. "What kind of story?" Julia asked, smoothing the child's hair. "A true story. About when you were young." Julia looked at Travis, who smiled encouragingly. She had never told her grandchildren the full story of how she and Travis had met, had kept the painful details private. But looking around at this gathering, at the family and life that had grown from those terrible days, she felt ready to share. "All right," Julia said. "When I was 19 years old, something very bad happened to me." She told them the story then, in terms appropriate for children, explaining that she had been hurt by someone in her family, but had been rescued by a kind cowboy who had carried her until she healed. She told them about the weeks in the hidden canyon, about falling in love, about building this ranch and this life together. "So you see," Julia finished, "sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. If I had not been hurt, I might never have met your grandfather. And then none of you would be here." The children were wide-eyed and somber. Young Thomas, Alice's oldest son, spoke up. "Was the bad person ever punished, Grandma, in his own way?" Julia said. "He died sick and alone without family or love. I think that is punishment enough." Travis squeezed her hand, and she knew he understood what it had cost her to tell that story, but also how important it was that their family knew where they had come from. As the sun set and the party continued, Julia found herself standing at the edge of the gathering, just watching. Travis came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist in the easy familiarity of decades together. "What are you thinking?" he asked, the same question he had asked her countless times over the years. "I am thinking that I am happy," Julia said simply. "Not just content or satisfied, but genuinely, deeply happy. I have you, I have our children and grandchildren, I have this beautiful place we built together. I have everything I could ever want." "So do I," Travis said, pulling her closer. "You are my everything, Julia. You always have been, from that first moment I saw you in the barn. I knew then, somehow, that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how profoundly." "We changed each other's lives," Julia said. "We saved each other." They stood together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, surrounded by the sounds of their family, the life they had built from ashes and pain and love. Julia's feet had long since healed, but the scars remained, a permanent reminder of what she had survived and overcome. She had been broken in that barn 27 years ago, burned and hurt and afraid. But Travis had carried her, literally and figuratively, until she healed. And in healing, she had found not just survival but a life of profound love and meaning. The cowboy who had carried her had become her husband, her partner, her home. Together they had built something beautiful and enduring, a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. As the evening deepened and their family lingered, not wanting the gathering to end, Julia leaned her head against Travis's shoulder and smiled. This was her happy ending, the one she had never dared to dream of in those dark days after the burning. It was better than any story, because it was real and hard-won and completely, perfectly hers. Travis kissed the top of her head and Julia closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of sage and earth and home. She had walked through fire, both literal and figurative. She had been carried when she could not walk, and she had healed into something stronger and more beautiful than she had ever been before. This was love. This was home. This was everything, and it was more than enough. It was everything.